Or user may click on a button. User will provide username, password, and he clicks on login button. When he clicks on login button, I should take the username, password, and I should send the request to an API, and the API will check if the credentials are valid or not. If the credentials are valid, then I may want to redirect user to home page. If the credentials are invalid, I may want to show a message to the user that invalid username or password. Where do you write that code here? You cannot write in HTML, you cannot write it in CSS, right? So where do you write
Yes.
that? You write it inside your TypeScript. The entire logic that you place within this TS file that is
Oh,
related to this particular component.
means enter the business logic. Main business logic should be like written from the TypeScript, like whether
Exactly.
database communications or
Yeah, yeah.
everything. Business logic should be written
Or
for the
whenever user triggers any event, if you want to respond to that event, right? And if you want to execute some code, where do you write that? You write that inside your TS file. This app.module.ts will not contain such logics. It contains what are all the components that are belonging to this module. Alright? Module consists of components. In my project, I may have 100 components, but all these 100 components may not be part of same module. They may be part of different modules. So how do you specify which component is part of which module? That will be there here. In the declarations, you specify the set of components that belongs to this module. All that declarations you do here. Is that clear?
Sorry, model.ts means
What are all the components that belongs to this module level code. When you wanna write, right, what is that module level code you wanna write is something you will understand as we progress. Do not worry on that.
okay.
So
And just I want to understand the structure. If you want to write any kind of new thing, this I'm unable to understand the structure. Like
because yeah, it's very right common for everyone because you are seeing it for the first time. When you see it for the first time, obviously you will feel confused, and there is so much of content here. Why do we use which file? On the first go, no one will be able to understand. No one will be able to understand, not only you. So do not worry. My job is to make sure that you understand all these things as we progress, right? And in one class, I'll not be able to teach you all these things, right? So that's where, do not worry. We will take it step by step. Today's aim is just to create a project, build a project, run the project, make some changes, see our changes are coming in the browser or not, and just understand that an Angular project will be consisting of module. Module consists of something called as what? Components. And component is the one that content is what is rendered to the browser. Is that point clear? All right. Is this clear, guys? If it is clear, now let's proceed further and let's make some small change. Now the requirement is, assume that I have an array. I want to display that array of elements in a template. So now assume that I'll create an array. What array? It can be a simple string array or it can be, right, an object array. Let's say roles. You call it as user, lead, or maybe something called as manager. You have an array. Now, what do we want to do? We want to display list of roles in our HTML page. So what do? We just name it as roles. How do you display, guys? You can display it as maybe, and then what do we write? How many LIs needs to be displayed?
2.
Not sure. Alright, not sure basically. That is dependent on how many elements are there in that array. If my array has 10 elements, then that should display how many LIs? Then that should display how many LIs, guys? 10 LIs. So we say LI. We use something called as ng for. In Angular, we have something called as ng for. Now what is this? This is an attribute. Again, attribute is what for us? Remember this discussion, guys. Never forget this. Oh, I have erased that. Never forget that. It can be an element. It can be an attribute. All these are called as what? All they are called as what, guys? Directives. All they are called as what? Directives. ng for is equals to, basically these are directives. This is another directive. ng for is another directive. Like how your component is one directive, ng for is another directive. We use a data type called as let. In JavaScript, we have a data type called as var. Var versus let is something that I'll explain a little later. We don't use in here. In is used for a different purpose. Of what is the array name that you have given here? Roles. Li star ng for let I of roles. Now our requirement is, if I just say I, see what will happen. Just say this. You will get I. But our requirement is I don't want I. I don't want I. Here I represents what? Each element in roles. Basically what we want is, we want someone to do computation, evaluation, get the value of I. I is not a static text here. I represents an element inside this roles array. So we want someone to do that compute or evaluation. How do you do that? Basically, template file, whenever you want to execute some expression, we use something called as interpolation. How do you represent the interpolation? By placing that inside double curly brackets. Just save this change, go here, and you can see your page is refreshed. You have got user, you have got lead, and you have got manager. Earlier I was representing static text, but I don't want I to be treated as a static text. I wanted I to be evaluated. That expression should be evaluated. Get the content and render the content in template. Whenever you want to do that, basically we make use of something called as what? Interpolation. Interpolation. Just to show you, 10 plus 20. It will be treated as normal text. But if you want to evaluate it as an expression, render the content a result of that expression, then you use this, you get 30.
Sir, why would you use the star ng for here? Like it's a variable as what it is the meaning?
It is a directive using which you iterate through the elements of this array, and if this array has 5 elements, then this element will be created how many times? 5 times. For each element in these roles, this li will be repeated and will be added to ul, will be added to ul, will be added to ul. So now if I want to do it in a table, so we do that on a row, table row. Row should be, tr should be repeated. You got it, madam?
No, sir. Actually, I think is there any abbreviation is like no star ng for that's a meaning. I'm asking like that.
You have for loop, right? In C, you may have something called as for loop.
Yes. Yeah.
This is that loop, ma'am. It is a directive. It is a directive. So, as I said, there are 3 kinds of directives: structural directives, attribute directives, and component directives. This is one of the directive. So, whenever you deal with directives, as I said, structure. Are you changing the structure? Like adding, removing elements here? What this ng for is doing?
Iterating.
It iterates over this, and for each iteration, what it is doing?
Adding an li.
Adding an li. So, are you not changing the structure of your content?
Yes, we are.
We are. When you say change the structure, it can be adding an element or it can be removing an element. It doesn't matter, right? So whenever you are calling structural directives, ngFor is a directive. So whenever you want to call
star refers to something like a structural directive or something. Why do we actually use a star? It could be simply ng4, right?
So when you create different directives, right? When you create different directives, each directive has a different purpose, right? Each directive has a different purpose. Now to specify that this is a structural directive, this is an attribute directive, what do is you the convention what Angular team has set is, if you want to call structural directives, you have to prefix it with what? Star. If you want to do interpolation, you have to use this. So that is the convention. Every piece of code that you write should have a convention, right?
Okay. So whenever star comes, it means that it is a structural directive.
Structural directive.
It's 11
Okay.
o'clock.
Right? We may write ng if. Again, that is also a structural directive which changes the structure of the code. So if I want to use ng if, I had to use something called as what?
Star ng.
Star ng for. Is that clear, guys? All right. So with that, we stop here for the day, and in our next class, our aim is implementing CRUD operations, guys. Implementing CRUD operations on an employee. So we will create quickly a backend API that will give us list of, or basically CRUD operations, and then we will build an Angular application using which we will try to perform creating an employee, reading the employee details, updating the employee, deleting the employee. So that is what is going to be our aim. So in that process, we will understand some other concepts of Angular. At the same time, we will try to build that particular application. That is the use case with which we will start our discussion. Right? So from next Saturday onwards, you will be having the class from 9 to 1, guys. Right? From next Saturday, it will be from 9 to 1. Right? With that, I stop here for the day, and we will continue this discussion in the next class. That will be on next Saturday at 9 o'clock. Thank you, guys.